Starfield Shattered Space has been out for a couple of weeks now. Many people have finished it and have posted their reviews and are enjoying and unfortunately hating the game all at the same time. Starfield Shattered Space is the first Starfield expansion, and I do believe it is a step in the right direction, but it has some many major flaws that have continued from the main game into the actual DLC itself. The DLC does have some improvement areas, but not nearly enough after a year of the game being out, and they say they've listened to a lot of the players' feedback. It does seem like they've listened to some, but not the majority of the feedback from the major player base that are still invested in Starfield. It does seem like Shattered Space and Starfield in general is going to be something that the modders are going to be fixing more than the actual developers over at Bethesda. But Starfield Shattered Space is that first DLC, and overall, I do think it is an enjoyable DLC. Today we're going to go over a little bit of a review, check what the Steam reviews are saying, and give some of my personal thoughts and see what the team could do potentially to improve it. The team apparently have responded to a lot of the criticisms, but we're going to go over that in a separate video. Today is just an overall review of the Shattered Space DLC with some of my thoughts and feelings mixed in there. If that does sound good, subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video, and stick around for much more Starfield and Bethesda related content. Now, I do apologise for the delay in this review. As some of you may know, I did get married a couple of weeks ago, so I've just been taking some time to chill, spend time with family, and just recover from the madness of everything that went into planning the wedding. So apologies for the lack of content over the last 2 weeks, but now we are back in full swing, and as you could see yesterday, we posted our final episode of the Starfield Shattered Space playthrough. Still got all the side quests. I've done a whole bunch of them and had loads of fun with them. There's a couple of little niggly bits that I'm missing that I haven't finished off yet, but overall, I've spent about 10 hours completing the Shattered Space DLC, and in those 10 hours I have quite enjoyed my time. I have thought it was relatively good, but there are, unfortunately, I feel like more downsides to positives with this DLC, and I'm an optimist. I always look for the brighter side and the good things, but unfortunately it feels like a lot of the feedback hasn't been taken on board, and it is the same aspects of the base game just in the DLC. Now, yes, obviously the DLC is a continuation of Starfield, so it's going to be very familiar and very similar to that base game. But there were many things they could have changed, twisted, and made a little bit better to improve the overall performance. Currently, the Shattered Space DLC is sitting at a mostly negative rating. So as you can see here, 30% of the almost 3,000 reviews since the game came out just 3 weeks ago are sat at positive. So 70% of the reviews for this game are negative. So the DLC does come in at $25.99. It is cheaper if you buy the base game and get if you buy the premium edition, which comes with it. So if you don't have Starfield already, but if you're playing this, more than likely you've already got the game and you want to look into getting a little bit more content out of it. Now, I will say that if you did enjoy the base game, most likely you're going to really enjoy Shattered Space. Which I did. I did enjoy it, but there are many things that it could improve upon. So firstly, the overall world and environment. I do think those were much more finicky and a little bit better looking than in the base game for some of the things. A lot more detail went into Dazra than what went into places like Neon and some of the other main cities. Dazra felt much more alive and much more explorable because it was on that base plot with a lot more effort gone into it, and it's focused primarily around one faction. Obviously, you can see as you walk through the city the destruction that the grav drive experiment did cause. And then later on, when you get through and you're exploring some of the anomalous caves and eventually get into the Citadel, I do think it looks absolutely stunning, and I do love that they have focused it on one planet, so you're not constantly in and out of menus, fast traveling from one place to another. I think that is something that they did really, really well. The area is handcrafted, looks good, there's not randomly generated things everywhere, and as you're exploring, not just from the storyline, but exploring the vastness of the planet, there is a lot of cool stuff out there that you can see. Some unique creatures that we haven't seen in the base game, and some unique creatures that are, well, not exactly unique, but they're just twisted from characters and creatures that we see in the base game. And that's where it rolls into the combat aspects as well. A lot of the enemies in the game are something that we've seen before in the base game, which is a little bit disappointing. I was hoping to see some really cool creatures that we'd never seen before, that we were fighting around with things that had never ever encountered us in that base game. But a lot of the stuff from the base game is in there. Some of them just has different names, or they're just void variants. Now, the void is obviously what caused what happens on the other side of the grav drive experiment. If you've played the DLC, you'll know what I mean, but the experiment's gone wrong, caused a tear in the fabric of space and time, and things from other time variants, I believe, something along those lines, can come through, and they've got just like a bluish effect. So they're normal base game enemies, just with a bluish effect, and they're a little bit harder to kill. So I did think that the enemy variation was a little bit disappointing in the actual storyline. Once again, exploring the planet, there are plenty of things that you can explore and see, which are relatively different, do look really cool, and it is a different, eerie environment overall. Which I really do like that. It is cool, but I don't understand why they didn't incorporate more of that into the actual base storyline itself and have you exploring some really cool, unique things. Like the first mission going into the story aspect of the DLC was really, really cool. It was awesome. Explore an eerie, abandoned space station, which is something we've not really had to do. There's a couple dotted around, but they're relatively small. The space station that you explore at the start of the Shattered Space DLC is massive, it's intriguing, it's interesting, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on in there that really opens up the storyline, as well as the exploration and the storyline aspect of that first space station mission. There's a lot of combat as well, so it feels like a very dynamic and fluid gameplay sort of loop. You go through, you have a little bit of dialogue, then there's a bit of action, then you explore a little bit just to uncover different aspects of the storyline and the Shattered Space DLC, which I thought was really nice and interesting. But then unfortunately the storyline does take a slight bit of a nosedive when you get to Dazra. I like that their storytelling aspect is really, really good and enjoyable, but I think they've gone a bit too lengthy with the dialogue on Shattered Space. I do feel like this is, if you are going through the main story, it's more sort of 60% dialogue, 40% let's shoot the shit out of some things. And for some people, I think that is going to be something that they really enjoy. But unfortunately, I think for the Shattered Space DLC, it should have been a little bit more combat based, and you find a lot of clues throughout going into various locations, exploring, coming across data slates, which then uncover much more about House of Arun and what is going on in the situation. But as soon as you get onto the main planet, that first 10-15 minutes is just dialogue. And yes, for a few minutes it's fun and enjoyable, because you can create your own story, pick your own things, and move around certain aspects and decide who you want to be with. But unfortunately, in Shattered Space and Starfield overall, those questions and those points that you get across don't really change too much. Once again, with Shattered Space, there's one big bit at the end where you choose which path you take, same as the base game. There's not little intricate missions and side quests that you do, or main story missions that you do, that really lock off certain aspects and change the storyline, as we've seen in previous Bethesda titles, which again I'm really disappointed with. I was hoping we'd have much more of effect on the overall gameplay depending on what dialogue choices we choose, especially considering some of these dialogue options go on for 5-10 minutes. It's a long time to be in there with no real impact to the actual gameplay or storyline itself. Yes, it teaches you a lot about House of Arun and what they're going through, how they've got to where they are. But I think there are more engaging ways that you could have done that by going through, finding data slates, finding points of interest across the map with little bits and bobs and set pieces set out to show a storyline. The Citadel, towards the end of the game, has some truly unique features in there which go over Shattered Space, House of Arun, and everything that they've gone through over the last few hundred years. but you are engrossed in combat and the mission that's in there. You don't have much downtime in the Citadel. And as far as I'm aware, you can't get back into the Citadel once you've finished the actual storyline itself. I've still got one more option to go through to see if that changes anything and we can still get into the Citadel. But as I've played so far, you can't get back in and explore those really cool areas. There's some really cool stuff in there. And hopefully you can get in there eventually. Maybe that's something that modders will fix. Now, another thing that I was really disappointed with is there was no use of spaceships. Now, yes, it being concentrated on one fundamental area, I think was good. You don't have to go in and out, but I think a couple of missions here and there where you could go out, do some space combat against some random bits and bobs would have been quite cool. And even without that, having more places thrown in for ship customization from House of Arun would have been quite cool. Obviously, when you've finished the main game, you get House of Arun set pieces, which you can place all across your base. You do have to finish the DLC and unlock a house, which then unlocks loads and loads of House of Arun constructible items, which they are quite cool. I'll have a video going over every one that you can actually unlock at a later date. Should be in a couple of days' time. I've already done a big chunk of it. So if that's something that interests you, let me know in the comments down below. But having that aspect going into the ships as well, which is sort of like a flagship feature of Starfield. Ships, vehicles, something they've never really done in Bethesda. But having that ship aspect, being able to customize, control, do everything you'd like with it is really, really cool. And I think they should have incorporated a little bit of that into the actual DLC itself. But unfortunately not. I think modders will probably change a few bits and bobs and maybe add some more ship stuff. There's loads and loads of cool stuff that goes to the ships already from the modding community. Whether the Shattered Space DLC will live on and add more stuff into that, I'm not 100% sure. And there's been loads and loads of feedback from it. As you can see, as I showed earlier, unfortunately a lot of it is negative. But I do think, reading through, a lot of them are very justified points. If you did enjoy the main base game, you will enjoy Starfield Shattered Space. But it does leave a void. I do think they could have done much more with it. I love the Shattered Space DLC. It's really enjoyable. And I would have bought it regardless, because Starfield is a game that I really enjoy. But I think longevity-wise, I don't think Starfield is going to have that same impact that previous Bethesda titles have had. They have already put a filing in for another DLC. It's trademarked as Starborn. So when we'll see news on that, I'm not 100% sure. But with this one being mostly negative, will they continue and add another DLC, or will Starfield be something that they slowly start to just walk away from and leave it where it is? We'll have to wait and see. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy the Shattered Space DLC? Overall, I enjoyed it, but I think they could have done a lot of things better. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. For now, though, we are going to wrap that one up there. Hopefully you've all enjoyed. I've been Cowboy. You've been awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you very soon with some more Starfield.